Hi, welcome to PDX Garden Home. If you've joined this channel before, you know it's been a while. I'm Ty, your gardener, and I'm coming to you from my garage office here in Portland, Oregon. Out that way is the driveway garden, as I've taken to calling it, and I hope to show a lot of it to you this year. Today, as we sit here in January, I thought it'd be fun to go over all the plants that are my favorites and we're going to be growing in the garden this year, 2026. Many of them are annuals, some of them are perennials. As we go along here, I'm going to show you examples of what I'm planting or I have planted here for 2026 using pictures and videos from the garden in 2025. So, I'm excited. I hope you are too. Let's get going.
So the first category is overwintering plants and perennials. And what I mean by overwintering, I'm casting a very broad net here for maybe some new perennials that I planted last year, overwintered, and now they're going to be their first show in the garden. Or I could be talking about plants that I actually started last year, were in the garden last year, and now are going to be in the garden again. I could be talking about things that are experiments to see if they are going to last, things that I think are perennial now, or at least they're just surviving. They're hardy enough to survive, but I'm not 100% sure because maybe I haven't done it before. I'm also including perennials in there, I'm including things like fruit and bushes and things like that that are things that I enjoy in the garden that I want to share with you as well. Okay, first up is alyssum. Sweet alyssum, the variety that I've grown, which came from Botanical Interest Seeds, was Oriental Nights. And this one I'm putting in the category of things I've overwintered. I didn't think of it as being perennial, but it is perennial. It is something that I planted from seed in the prior year, and you can see it here. It has a nice, the reason it's called sweet alyssum, it does have a nice sweet fragrance to it. I grew it last year and it's surviving. So I'm not planting new seeds this year, but it is a plant that I do plan to keep and have in the garden. I've got it in some pots now that it will keep going, and then I can transplant it into other places or keep it in the pots that I have through this next garden season. Apples. Well, when I first started gardening at this property 16, 17 years ago, I planted apple trees from bare root along this walkway and espalier them. So we have several apple trees here. I have planted another one a couple of years ago in a different part over on this walkway is on the east side. If you go over to the west side, I have one kind of that I'm trying to grow as a columnar apple tree. So I keep them trimmed quite a bit, and I'm not, I've been more concerned about the look of the espalier than I have about the production of the apples. I think a real pro could probably handle both, but where that's gone is that my apple production isn't always great because sometimes I'm cutting off the wrong parts that are going to produce apples, I think. But in any case, we got quite a few apples this year. We have mostly Fuji and some Honeycrisp apples in the mix here, and I really had a good apple year, because normally what will happen is there'll be a bunch of apples that come on and they'll have all kinds of bugs or fungus damage or different kinds of things. I haven't spent any time trying to protect them or spray or do anything like that in the past. But this year, somehow miraculously, they were mostly all bug free. In fact, I think they were all bug free. I did see there was some of that dimpling that comes with some kind of apple kind of disease kind of thing that you can get on a couple of them. But I actually had some really perfect apples. And so my daughter, my 2-year-old that has been in the garden with me this year, and I just enjoyed eating the apples in the garden, and we ate every one that we could. And pretty much every time she went out, she was looking for whether there was an apple, a ripe apple or not. So it was a really fun thing for us. Echinacea is a flower that is a perennial flower. I've grown it successfully as a perennial year after year in my old garden, planted from seed, and then once I had a cluster, they just would keep coming back reliably. And sometimes this is called the cone flower. I enjoy it. I last year did not actually get any echinaceas to bloom in the garden because I was just restarting the garden last year. I had seedlings. So I had echinacea seedlings, which I've now overwintered, and I will hopefully see some blooms as I plant them out in the garden this year. But oddly enough, I did get one that bloomed starting in late September, October. and it's still blooming a little bit right now. So echinacea, I've always thought of it as a warm weather plant. It seemed like in my old garden, it always came out and did its thing when it was hot outside. So it was kind of shocking to me that I was getting this bloom in October. I had it in the protected area of my new potting bench area. So maybe that's what it is. And I don't have a video of it. I just have this little picture of it. But yeah, I thought this was really just one of those nice little surprises that make you smile in the garden of something that happens that is unexpected. My echinacea bloomed this year, but in October, just one. But hopefully I'll have several more of them to show you in this coming garden season. Grapes. I need to plant more grapes. I had planted a variety of different grapes a few years ago in the old garden. They never produced while I was there because they were too young. I wish I could just take them with me, but I don't think that works that well. If you know if it's easy to just transplant grapes, let me know. I might still run over there and grab them. I have access to do that. But in any case, what I have in this garden, I do have a grape vine that I've had there for a long time, almost as long as those apple trees, like 16, 17 years. And it's kind of produced off and on. I think it was the flame red or the red flame grape. It's seeded. And in terms of production, when it doesn't produce, the reason why is because it just comes on too late. So a lot of times I'm not getting the grapes until it gets too cold, and then they just kind of rot out on the vine, or they're no good. I have this other grape that I have been harvesting the last couple of years that I got from my uncle David, who lives down in the Sweet Home area, had given me a grapevine from his garden, I believe, and I planted it in mine, just kind of in a random kind of middle area, and I've kind of built my paths around it now because it does produce every year, and it also is seeded, but it produces a nice kind of juicy dark purple grape. I'm not sure what variety it is. Actually, I don't know at all what variety it is. So I can't really advise you on varieties. I'm a very amateur grape grower, but it is something that I do enjoy having in the garden. And when they come on for me, that particular vine that I'm talking about in kind of mid to late September, it's nice to just go out there and eat some grapes. It's really just enough for me to enjoy it. My family, my wife is not particularly interested in seeded grapes, so unless I'm juicing it, it's not something that's helpful to bring into the house or anything like that. My 2-year-old did like it though, so she'd eat it with me, but she was pretty open to anything this year. I think later she might get more picky about having the seed in there. Lavender. Now, this was one of my baby girl's favorite ones, our 2-year-old. She would go this year and grab stems off the plant and smell them, and then she would bring it to dad or to mom and insist that we had to smell them too. And I tell her, I've already smelled it, but we had to smell it together, right? So we did a lot of smelling lavender this summer, and I just loved it. These plants I got as bushes from Costco, just little bushes over. I got them the year before, so back in 2024, planted them in these pots, and then they were ready to go, and they were flowering and giving us that fragrance in the 2025 garden. They are perennial, so I expect they'll be just fine for 2026. The only thing you do, and I have done it already this year, is trim them back. So if you don't keep them trimmed, my experience with lavender like that is that then they get woody, they get big and bushy, and you get to a point where you can't trim them back as far as you want to, or you'll ultimately kill the plant.
Well, I got these lilies that are purple, and I can't for the life of me figure out or remember where I got them from. I thought it was botanical interest, but that was previously I'd gotten the blackberry lily groomed from seeds from botanical interest. It comes up with a nice, pretty little orange yellow flower. Orange, not really yellow, more of an orange red flower. I got those in the old garden, and I loved them there. But these I grew from seeds somewhere, and they popped out purplish flowers. They looked nice this last year in the garden, and I think they're going to survive and overwinter and look nice in next year's garden. Lobelia has been one of my favorite plants to grow. I've been growing it for years. I get these seeds from botanical interests as well. This version is the Crystal Palace, and I grew them in pots last year. First started in seeds and then put them in pots around some of my shrubs, most notably around the sky pencil plant that is in the eastern side of the garden. And I love how it's looked. It worked out, or it turned out very nice for my tastes, anyways, and for what I like looking out in the garden at. Um, and I thought I was going to tell you that I was just going to stick with these plants that were already in these pots and seem to be surviving over the winter and let them grow next year. But I found that I actually ordered more seeds of these, so maybe I'll plant up some more seedlings of these. These would usually be grown as annuals in our climate, so I'm not certain they will survive till next year. So it's a good thing that I ended up having a seed packet to grow some more. But as of right now, in January, when it's been blistering cold outside, they are still surviving. They're still carrying on. So maybe we'll see. They can survive as perennials and usually warmer climates, and they also tend to reseed. So maybe that's what I'm seeing, is that they've reseeded themselves at some point. But in any case, I'll keep growing them and keep showing you videos and pictures of them. Loveliness is a seed that I have been growing for years. I first grew it in the old garden, and what attracted me to it was both the scent as well as the look. I like to grow it kind of along the border, be the kind of the low, I use it as like a low ground cover border on the very edge that's closest to kind of a walkway when I've done it. And I was blown away after the first time that I had planted it. I had planted it out, and I remember walking through the garden and thinking, what is that kind of soapy, and not in a bad way, soapy, clean smell, fragrance that's going on? And I realized it was coming from these plants, from these flowers. And so I've been chasing growing it ever since. I think there was a year where it didn't grow well for me. These are perennial, or they can be perennial, and so I have a whole long row of them in the garden from last year that I am counting on coming back this year. We'll see. Maybe some of them won't come back, or maybe all of them will come back. We'll check it out in the garden. I'm not intending to plant more seedlings of these this year. I'm planning to rely on last year's seedlings to be perennial and fill out that border this year. I started out primarily as a veggie grower, and many years ago, one of my first flowers that I grew from seed was Rudbeckia, a red Rudbeckia, and I still remember it because I remember how happy I was, or how impressed I was with how beautiful this flower was that I was able to grow from seed. And then I just wanted to grow it every year after that, and then I didn't. It is supposed to be a perennial. The one that I had died off, and then I didn't happen to find those exact seeds in the next year after or so, and didn't keep, and really never kind of got back to getting those seeds, kind of a nice red Rudbeckia, until last year. So last year, before the season started, so probably sometime in 2024, I planted some Rudbeckia seeds, red Rudbeckia seeds, and by the 2025 season, I had a nice plant in the garden, and it flowered beautifully for me. Violas are another go-to flower that I have in the garden every year. I grow them from seeds many years, all kinds of different colors. My first were called Johnny Jump Ups, and they would just reseed themselves and spread around and perennialize. And I had Johnny Jump Ups going around my garden for years. I've worked through those, and they're no longer in my garden. I don't have any leftover Johnny Jump Ups still going around at this point. But last year I had a dark purple, almost black viola that I really loved the look of. I planted it along the border, essentially where I had planted Loveliness along the edge of the path. Once I got to the end of my Loveliness, I started the almost black violas down that path. I also had them in several pots. They were just a workhorse in the flower portion of the garden, in the flower show in the garden last year, and I hope many of them will come back. Violas do tend to survive and come back in my garden, so I expect those will come back because I don't have any seeds of those to plant this year. Well, I wanted to round out this section of the video about perennials and things that I was overwintering with a couple of bushes that I had gotten from Costco a year and a half, 2 years ago. And that looked nice in the garden this last year, and I'm looking forward to how they'll look in the garden this coming year. And that's the Sunshine Ligustrum and the Tea Olive. The Sunshine plant, that one, it's the leaves are green in part of the year, and then in the summer, as it gets into the fall, they turn this beautiful yellow, and I think that's why they call it a sunshine. That's why the sunshine's in the name. And then the tea olive is not tea or olive, but it's a nice evergreen shrub that has these little white flowers that come out during bloom time. So these are a couple of things that I'm enjoying in my garden that you might look at for yours. Well, slightly different category of things that I plant in the prior year to then over winter and bloom in the spring are fall bulbs. That's how they're generally always planted. I'm talking about things like tulips, daffodils, muscari, alliums, and I've grown many of these, and crocuses, and I have many of them ready to go in the garden for this year. I'm growing in pots. Typically in our climate, in our area, I would have planted in my pots all of these bulbs. Garlic, let me throw that in there too. I would have planted all of these bulbs sometime in October or November, but I actually didn't get around to doing it until after Thanksgiving, so that last week in November, first week of December. I think it'll still work out. They just need a certain amount of time of cold before they can go, and I think that is just fine in our climate to plant them that late. At this point in January, it's probably too late, but who knows? I mean, you can experiment and try things out. I planted the garlic in the actual beds this year. Last year I planted garlic in pots just because I didn't have the beds ready for them to go into, and because you were planting in the fall for 2025, I would have been planting my bulbs for last year all the way back in October, November of 2024. So this year I'm planting, though, the garlic in the beds. I did have the beds on the west side ready to go for those, but I planted tulips and daffodils and muscari, and alliums, and some crocuses in pots. And I had a combination of bulbs that were left over from last year and bulbs that were purchased brand new. I purchased some more daffodils just to expand my collection, and purchased some new tulips because while they can come back, I just haven't had luck with tulips coming back on the regular, so I always buy new bulbs just in case on those. I did not buy new muscari, so whatever comes up on that will be what survived from last year. And crocuses, I did buy some more of those, but I also had many that survived from, I'm hoping that survived from last year. And when I say survived from last year, I dug up all of these bulbs from the pots, emptied the pots out so I could rearrange things, and then replanted them in new pots. So hopefully that'll work. We'll see how that goes this year. But let me give you some more details on some of my favorite ones that I've got pictures of to show you from last year. So starting with daffodils. I'll start with daffodils. Daffodils are a workhorse. They perennialize. They'll come back year after year for me. I grew them in pots last year, so I did dig them out of those pots because I'm moving things around, and then I've replanted them in new pots, but I didn't have to do that. The daffodils would have come back, and there's just an amazing variety of different kinds of daffodils and colors you can get. They come earlier than the tulips, and so I've really enjoyed them. I'm going to talk about alliums. Now, alliums is a broader classification that include things in the onion family, leeks, garlic, onions, both the bulbing and the chives type of onion. But I'm talking about decorative alliums. So there's actually alliums that you don't eat that are for decorative purposes. They'll have the little kind of what I call the pom-poms on top. I think they're great. What's interesting to me is that by the bulb, these are some of the more expensive bulbs. So they're a little more expensive per bulb than, say, a tulip. And so I don't get as many of them, but I do. They are supposed to be perennialized, or perennial, so that they would come back year after year. So I did get a few in last year's garden that I'm expecting to come back this year. I think I did. No, I didn't. I was going to say I thought I bought some more bulbs of those, but I didn't buy new bulbs of alliums this year. So I'm just relying on the bulbs that I pulled out of pots from last year to come back again this year. I have both purple and a white alliums, and they were great. I mean, they come out at a time when I don't have as much going on. They come out after the tulips start to fade, and then the alliums pop out, and so it gives that kind of interest in the garden after the tulips have kind of faded out before summer flowers are really ready to come in. Garlic, a special kind of allium that I make sure to grow some of each year. My dad used to talk about garlic with a reverence reserved for religious fervor, I would say. He talked about it in terms of eating it and wanting to put it on everything. He talked about it in terms of growing it. I didn't really learn about the technicalities of growing garlic from my dad. I didn't really learn the technicalities of growing anything in the garden from my dad. My dad always grew a garden. I mean, I think there was a lot of predisposition to growing a garden I got from my dad and from being around it, and maybe some basics, some just basic understanding of things of the soil and watering and kind of what that lifestyle of being a gardener was like I would have gotten from my dad. But when it came to, say, garlic and specifically, I learned over the years through reading and watching other YouTube videos and so on about the different kinds of garlic. And in the two broad families, you have soft neck and hard neck garlic, which I try to grow a little bit of each. My understanding is the hard neck garlic is supposed to be more of a culinary delight. One of the reasons that I like to grow the hard neck garlic is that's the kind that puts up the stiff stem and then has what's called the garlic scape on the end. You know, the total garlic is going to be harvested maybe late July for me. So it's actually garlic scapes are going to come on for me maybe late June, early July. But in any case, they're a nice kind of thing that you typically only eat if you're a gardener, because garlic scapes are not readily available in the store, and so those are the flower tip ends of the garlic stem. And of course, what you typically are actually growing and harvesting is the garlic bulb that's under the ground there. And so that's the hard neck garlic, and then the soft neck garlic I like to grow as kind of the mainstay, because I like the look in my garden chic and in my garden environment of being able to braid that garlic up. So those soft stems, I let them dry out, and then I'm going to braid those up, and then I'll hang them off a shelf or somewhere, maybe even near the kitchen, and it just kind of creates that aesthetic that, hey, I'm a gardener and I have this garlic from my garden kind of thing. It's just, I garden for the look and aesthetic and kind of atmosphere of gardening as much as for the results of like a veggie that I can eat. So anyway, those are some initial thoughts on garlic, but I thought let me actually take you back to December in a video that I had created back then but not published here. About my growing and planting garlic for this coming season. It is December 2025, and I planted the garlic today. It is the first week of December. I'm running a little bit late with this. And I plant two kinds of garlic, two varieties. There's so many different varieties you can get. I got my seed garlic from Territorial Seed this year. Hopefully I'll do a better job of saving kind of the biggest heads of garlic for myself for the future. I'm always kind of poor at doing that, but in changing out gardens, I for sure haven't been doing that. In any case, why do I do two different varieties? I do one hardneck variety and I do one soft neck variety. So the soft neck variety I did was called Music, and the hard neck variety I did was called Ishlam Red. I've got my holes, I'm spacing about 12 inches apart. I'm not sure if I have enough garlic that will go this entire stretch, but I'll be happy to do it the entire stretch. I like to plant things kind of in and around each other, so the idea of having garlic kind of spaced out throughout the garden is the way I do it. So yeah, that's garlic. That's gardening in December here in Portland, Oregon.
Tulips. There is something magical about tulips in the spring to me. I love growing lots of them. In the old garden, I've grown hundreds at a time and bought all kinds of different varieties. But in this driveway garden, I only have limited space. So I've stuck to just buying tulips, the bags that are pretty cost effective towards the end of the season at Costco. I got them in the fall and put them in the pots at the same time that I put in my other bulbs about December this year.
So I've populated the pots on this first layer with new tulip bulbs and new daffodil bulbs. Over here in the black, I think it was the black one, I put in some new alliums as well. And then keep going, starting on this end with the white pot, then the clay pot, the row of clay pots. Again, new tulip bulbs, new daffodil bulbs. And then when we get to here on the second level, there's a white, and then there's a kind of a blue and white, almost Chinese design pot there. Another white one, then a clay one, and then another white pot there. On this level, I'm going to have new tulips, but I'm going to put what I think are daffodil bulbs, say from prior year. I may be misjudging what the bulbs saved from the prior year actually are. They might be something other than daffodils, but I think it's what they're daffodils. So I'm going to put those in there as well, and we'll see how they come up.
And so the kinds of tulips that I'm growing are I think they call them the Darwin hybrids. Those are like the classic kind of shape that you see a lot of, and it's a lot of what you get if you get your tulip bulbs from Costco. I've also in the past grown what are called the Appledorn shaped tulips, which kind of have more of this like lotus looking flower to it, and I've grown what they call species tulips, which are kind of more what the original tulip was like, and they're kind of smaller petals and different varieties of that as well, and I love it all. It's great. The only downside to tulips is they can be quite spendy. I mean, I guess if you are buying thousands and thousands, maybe you have an even better price. But when I've bought bulk, I've only been able to get the price down to maybe 30 cents a bulb, and but now that I don't even buy bulk at that level, I'm doing more like 40 to 50 cents a bulb, I think, if I looked at it. So it is a little spendy, and tulips can come back year after year, but I haven't had much luck with them doing that. Some will, some won't. So I always buy new tulips. So at that level, if you're doing hundreds and hundreds of bulbs, you're spending hundreds of dollars on bulbs every year, which if you really like it the way I do, and it's kind of a show piece in your garden, it can be worth it. But I think my wife questions my bulb budget sometimes. So anyway, that's what I'm doing this year. Costco Darwin tulips and what was left over from last year, which was also different kinds of Costco tulips. So should have a pretty good variety. It's always fun to see like what came back from last year. I know what I got for this year, which is some reds, and I like to grow like reds and purples and pinks in terms of the tulips. And so yeah, we'll update you when we get into the spring. Hopefully I'll have some more pictures of the tulip show then, but here I'm showing kind of what I had from last year in the pots, and it's kind of a similar strategy for this year.
Well, moving on from things that have overwintered or bulbs that I've planted in the fall, let's talk about seeds that I plant in the December, January timeframe. Those really, I think of that, even though I was earlier talking about things that have carried over or even things I planted in the fall, I really consider my seeds, my seeding that I do in December and January to be like the first seeds that I plant, kind of the kickoff to the seeding season. Starts very slow in January, and then it starts to ramp up in February, and then it's really going in earnest for me in March. But let's talk about December, January. I'm talking about things like fava beans. I'll read my list off to the side here. Fava beans, artichokes, carnations, pansies, poppies, and snapdragons. Fava beans. Well, when it comes to fava beans, we like to eat them okay. I like them. They're not. I think a lot of people like rave about them. They're not so spectacular that I would grow them just because they're just great tasting, but they are kind of the earliest bean that I can get, and they are an earliest plant that I can get. Now, a lot of people, most people, would plant these um, in the fall, and then they would come up, and you would get your kind of green foliage sometime in the winter, early spring, and be one of your first plants, and then you would be able to harvest. I never get my seeds in time to actually get them in the ground in the fall. So what I do is I plant them in cell trays in December or January. This year I did it at the beginning of January, so I get a jump start because they're in the heat and under the lights, and I get a jump start in the germination. So I get nice little bean plants, and then I get them out in the ground after that, and then they tend to catch up that way, and I will have a harvest by May or June. Probably more like June on that, but that's still kind of one of the first harvests that I'm going to have of anything. My wife's not particularly fond of the fava beans because you take you take the bean out of the pod like you would any bean, but then you have to actually double shell the bean as well in order to get down to the thing that you typically would eat or cook or eat. I don't know if you technically have to. You can probably leave one of the inner shells on there and still eat it okay. But the typical culinary practice is to double shell, is to take all the shells off, which means that there's more manual work to dealing with fava beans. But it's like a once a year thing. You get, my garden can only hold so many in the small garden anyway, so you get these fava beans and you spend a couple hours shelling them all, and you have a hot fava bean feast, and then we're done. That's it. And I found last year that my 2-year-old actually enjoyed shelling them with me, so it was kind of something we could do together. So I'm looking forward to doing that again this year. Artichokes. After fava beans, artichokes are usually the next thing that I plant from seed in my garden. Artichokes can be perennial. Are they create that bush and that should survive over the winter and could come back in theory year after year. But what I find is that if I have several artichokes, if I've got 4, for example, maybe 1 or 2 will come back and I'll lose the other 2 over the winter. Right now I've got 1 in the garden from last year that has been surviving, so that's great. But it leads me to always plant new artichokes every year. And maybe in part the reason I do that is just because I'm anxious to plant something at the beginning of January, and it's a seed. It's one of the first seeds that I'm going to plant. So it's fun to get the garden seedling season started and kick it off with some artichokes. Carnations. I have this dream that I'm going to have a mass of beautiful carnations growing all at once, kind of in clusters. But I haven't achieved it yet. I have started to get a mass of the greenery, so maybe we'll see it this year. I have some carnations overwintering. What I've been surprised about is that these things seem to be like cool weather crops. They keep going into the winter, and even right now in January, I have a little red carnation blooming. But that's how it's been kind of throughout the entire season, the entire year of growing the carnations, is that I'll get blooms here and there, but I don't get a bunch of blooms together all at once, at least not yet. I'm kind of wondering if it takes a couple of seasons for these plants to mature to really do that or not. I am just kind of learning. I'm still, maybe I'm on year 2.5, year 3 of my carnation journey. So I'm planting some more seeds now, and I also have a bunch of plants that are still surviving out in the garden as we speak.
pansies. They are my universal fill-in flower, and depending on the type of year we have here in Portland, Oregon, if it's not too hot, there are certain places in my garden where they'll just kind of go through the entire gardening season. They're one of the first bloomers, but they also are kind of what gives us something after the tulips die down before the full summer flowers come in. We still have that bit of a cool period there, and the pansies are basically what fill things out during that period. So I like to grow lots of pansies, and the thing that I've learned I like is to grow a large number of them. They can Some of the plants can overwinter, and I am trying to overwinter them. They can be perennial in that way, but I plant all new seeds as well. I planted a whole kind of 10-20 tray of pansy seeds this January. And that's the other thing that I learned in the last few years is to plant them early. I used to follow the seed packet instructions, and I would plant more like in maybe March with the idea that I would have plants ready by April or May, but it doesn't work that way. I've got to plant them early January or even December, and then if I grow them under lights, I might have blooms that way by late March or early April. At least that's what's worked out for me. They are kind of similar. They are in the same family, I believe, as violas, and so my pansies and violas, I use the same timing essentially with them. Although what I found is that violas tend to naturally overwinter better. I don't know if it's just that the initial plant is overwintering or if they're just self-seeding more, but they do a better job of coming back on their own. The violas do. So anyway, but back to pansies, as you'll see in these little clips that I have here. I'm growing lots of different kinds of colors and varieties of pansies, and I grow them in and around my pots that have bushes and in and around my blackberries, for example. So I love growing as many different pansies as I can. They just are nice to like tuck in all kinds of places in the garden.
I've never had great luck planting poppies because I try to grow them in seed trays, and you really, from what I read, you're supposed to try to direct seed them. So I'm gonna give it a shot over here. I'm gonna plant them over here, kind of near my pots, maybe close to the apple tree here, and see if I can get anything out of it that way.
As you'll see if you watch my channel, I push the limits on planting almost everything in cell trays and starting them under lights, germinating them under controlled conditions before I get them into the ground. I do that with peas and beans and corn, and I even do that with squashes. I've learned to be very careful in how I do that with those things. But one thing that I still will put seed directly to the ground is poppies. And what I do there is I've just been sprinkling the seeds out in the garden sometime in December. I'll just kind of sprinkle them out there. And usually a packet, you got lots of really fine seeds, so I just kind of throw them and hope it works out. And last year I got one beautiful poppy. I'd thrown out some black swan seeds, and I got one beautiful poppy out of it, and it was a prize in my garden to get that one poppy. So I haven't had a ton of success in growing poppies. I have tried to start them in cell trays. I think people do that. You can do that. I just haven't had much success in starting them in cell trays, transplanting them, that whole routine with the poppies. And I think I would have more success in the spreading the seeds around if I'm more careful about the weeds I pull, because the problem is that when the poppies germinate and they come up in the outdoor garden, they kind of look like weeds to me, the initial. And so once I realized after I saw one that got kind of left there that I was lazy about pulling as a weed grow into a poppy later, it dawned on me, oh my gosh, I just need to be more careful and really just not pull anything in that area where I've sprinkled the seeds until I know for absolute sure what it is. And so that's what I'll do this year, and hopefully we'll see some more poppies. This year, instead of black swan, I'm growing a Hungarian blue poppy. So we'll see how it goes. I really love the look of poppies, and if some of you out there have tips in growing great poppies and lots of poppies in the garden, please throw it in the comments below, because I'm still trying to figure out my mojo on that. I do not have a ton of great success when growing poppies, but when I do get one, man, I cherish it. snapdragons, I used to think of these as perennial, or I was trying to grow them as perennials, but I haven't had much luck in keeping them in the garden and keeping them coming back. I think they are technically perennials, but they're too tender to reliably be perennial for my environment. If you're here in Portland or somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, similar, and you're able to keep them reliably perennial, put something in the comments down below. Tell us about it. But for me, what I find is that it just works better to reseed them every year. So I may have something that I didn't pull out in the garden, and we'll see this coming season. But otherwise, I plant my snapdragon seeds early. I could plant them even earlier. The year before, I actually planted them like, I think, August time frame, and then kind of grew up the seedlings under lights and let them overwinter under the lights, and then planted them out in the garden. So if I had thought about it or had the time, that's what I would have done. But I did plant my snapdragon seeds here in January. And I think that should work, so I'll get some blooms at some point here in the coming season. Snapdragons are wonderful. They can be in all kinds of different colors. They're a good, beautiful flower for the garden, and something I definitely recommend growing. February is the time where I get a jump start on the hot weather plants that take a while to mature and need a longer period of warmth to really fruit. If I actually get fruit at all, that can be iffy sometimes here in Portland, Oregon for me. And so that is peppers and eggplants. I'm going to seed them in February. I'm going to grow them up to as strong plants as I can before they go out into the garden. And then as soon as there is warmth there, which is going to be like late June, they will go in the ground, and then they will, hopefully I'll get some fruits out of them. And the other thing I start in February, which will sound controversial in how I do it, but stay tuned for what I have to say about that, is peas. So I'm going to start my green peas in February, and stay tuned for the way I do it, which is different than what most people would advise. With eggplants, I like to grow a couple of varieties. I usually like to grow kind of a longer Asian variety, and then I'll grow a kind of more rounder, you might think of it as an Italian variety. And the longer Asian variety, I've done different versions of it, and had success with the different ones. But one of the ones that I feel like I've had the most success with has been a millionaire kind of Asian eggplant style from Territorial Seed. And then there's a different variety that is called the Rosa Bianca, which I just like the look of it. I don't have a picture here of it, but I just like the look of the eggplant. It just has, it makes this kind of nice, round, almost apple looking, but purple, not red, but apple looking eggplant. And so eggplants, they are the thing that I grow that require the most heat. Melons, I think, also require a ton of heat. I don't really have a lot of success with growing melons. I used to grow them when I had a greenhouse in the greenhouse, and I might get a few melons. I might try a couple here again this year to see if I can pull some tricks to get it. But really with like melons, I have to really baby it and really try to do everything, put like mulch, plastic mulch around it to heat up the ground, or put it under cover, or do a lot of things to really get it hot enough. At least that's what I find in my garden. And with eggplant, I will get some production out of eggplant, but I used to also grow those in the greenhouse, and that's when I would get the most production out of them. And so last year when I grew them, although I don't have pictures of the final eggplants, I did get a few eggplants out of it, and it looked nice in the garden. I have a few plants that would have little baby eggplants on it, and just kind of looked nice in the garden, but I didn't get a ton of production. I don't get the amount of eggplants, for example, that I get in terms of that I'll get when I get in terms of tomatoes. I get way more jalapenos and Thai chili peppers than I get eggplants. So eggplants, I'll get some production, but it's kind of a rare. It's kind of a more precious item in my garden. The eggplants that I get, and they can take up quite a bit of space in the garden too. So the pictures that I have here are actually from June of last year. So you'll see that they kind of started flowering and
in June, but it takes a long hot period for the eggplants to do well. And the thing is, here in Portland, it will get really hot. Like, for a week or two, it'll get, it can get into the hundreds, right? Or high 90s or into hundreds. But that's not really what it needs. What it needs is to like be in the 80s for sustained periods of time. And that's the problem, is that here in Portland, it doesn't really get into the 80s for like 2 months straight. And that's what I would need in order to really grow some of these hot weather crops more consistently and successfully without doing more professional things to keep them. I know there are professional growers in our area who do get good eggplant production and who do get better pepper production than I do, for example. But they're doing more work than I am in how they're doing it, and they've got the setup and they know what they're doing, and I don't. So I'm just giving you kind of one guy who's grown these things over the years. You can take my advice. You can take what I do as what is easy to grow, not what's necessarily possible, because there's a lot of things that are more possible than what I do. But I'd say that what I do is what is actually easy to do in our climate, and I would say eggplants are not the easiest to do in our climate. But like I said, I do get some. Peppers are one of my favorite things to grow, and I plant them from seed in February. Unfortunately, though they're my favorites, I'm not very good at growing big sweet peppers or bell peppers. So a lot of the peppers I grow are different kinds of chilies. And I grow kind of the more common types of things. So I grow a lot of jalapenos. I've had a lot of success with those. So I like to grow jalapenos and then chop them up and put them in a pepper sauce. I grow some Thai chili peppers usually. Sometimes I don't really do anything with those but have the bush for decoration. Just having that pepper bush with the little red peppers hanging off, I just think looks nice. I grow Anaheim peppers, which are not hot and are a little bit larger, and some of those will work for me. I grow Jimmy Nardellos, which are sweet. I think they might be related to a peppercini, but they're red when they're really fully ready to go, and I like to snack on those in the garden. They're really nice. I grow shishito peppers. I really like to grow those, and I've had good success with that. I think like the Spanish alternative to a shishito pepper is the Pedron pepper in my view of the pepper world, and so I like to grow those Pedron peppers as well. I've started growing those in the last couple of years, and that's kind of the universe of the peppers that I grow. I don't like something so hot. I've grown habaneros before, and that's worked for me, but I haven't. I don't like how hot those are, so I don't like things at that level of heat, and and then people are really into growing different kinds of peppers and chilies. They like to grow like the ghost pepper and things that have like extreme amounts of heat with them. I'm not into that. I like to grow things that I actually would eat, and I like spicy, but not that level of spice. I think it is counterintuitive that chilies, hot peppers tend to grow better for me than the sweet peppers. And I've just found that chilies kind of actually grow or will survive longer in cooler weather and still produce into the fall as things cool down, whereas the sweet peppers, like a bell pepper, for example, seems to need a longer period of sustained heat in order to get a nice bell pepper. At least that's been some of my experience. So I'm going to grow more peppers again this year. I hope you follow me on that, and I hope you plant some too. Tell me in your comments below particularly if you're in my area in the Pacific Northwest. Do you see a difference between the sweet peppers and the hot peppers in terms of how they do in your garden? Peas. Both the snap peas, which is what I like to grow a lot of, and then I'll grow a little bit of the shelling peas. This is where I have a garden controversy, if there is such a thing, because most people will say you shouldn't do this, that they don't grow well this way. But I will actually plant the peas in cell trays and let them germinate, and I'll get little pea sprouts first, and then I'll put them outside in the garden. So I'll actually put my peas in cell trays so that they can sprout in February, and then I'll get them into the garden by March. Into the garden beds by March. And the reason I do that is because I do think it is better, and they theoretically should grow well in our climate just directly in the ground, except for one thing, which is I can't control the slugs. I don't have the time to get out there and ensure that my new pea sprouts that are just coming up aren't getting decimated by slugs in our area. And so what happens is if I just plant the peas straight into the garden, I never really see the sprouts. And what I figured out was going on was that they are sprouting. It's just that the bugs are getting them, namely the slugs are getting them very quickly before I can see many of them germinate. So I get better results if I can germinate them and get them going before get them going a little bit before they're in the ground, so I can see them, and then I can put the slug pellets, the Sluggo is what I use, around where I planted them after I get them in there, and it's not as big of an issue. Which, I mean, begs the question: couldn't I just put Sluggo around where the peas are planted? Yeah, I could, but if I like kept up with that as well. But that's the other thing is it's like watching it every day and making sure, did it sprout, did it not sprout, and not really knowing what's going on. And the fact that just the slug damage, I get back to that. It can mislead me as to what's actually going on, because I think they're not sprouted, but they actually did sprout and they just got their tops chewed off of them is what I think actually happens. So anyway, my methodology, which I think is, as I said, is controversial. Not most gardeners wouldn't suggest doing this because you may not get as good a results this way in the long-term growth of the plant. But my methodology is to plant them in cell trays and then put them out. And my peas grow. I don't know if I lose production this way because I don't know what to compare to, I guess. But in terms of what kind of peas I like the super sugar snap peas. I like sugar snap peas. I sometimes I've grown some of the snow peas, but there's basically I look at it three types. You got snow peas, which are the really flat type, and often used in some types of Asian cooking. I don't like those; are not as sweet to me. I really like the sugar snap peas. They're the ones where you eat the whole pea pod, but it plumps up and it's juicy and more sweeter, and I really like those. So that's what I grow the most of. But I'll usually plant a vine or two of shelling peas, just so that I like snacking on those fresh in the garden. So I'll pick the shelling pea and then I'll open up the zipper and I will eat the little peas in the garden. I don't really like harvesting them and then having to shell them to actually serve at the dinner table, because that just feels like too much work, a lot of work. So I don't do that with shelling peas. I reserve the shelling peas as just kind of a nice little delicacy for me in the garden, but not something that I grow a lot of to harvest for the dinner table.
March is the biggest month yet for putting in seeds, planting seeds in my garden. I try to plant most things from seed, and so as the months progress, we get to March and it's game on. Everything from brassicas, I grow a variety of kales and cabbages, broccoli, to some of the summer flowers that need a longer lead start. And then it's also when I start tomatoes, one of the big show pieces of many vegetable gardeners, and certainly for me. So let's talk about the various things that I have been growing in the garden, plan to grow this year, and I'm going to be starting from seed in March. Asters, I plant these seeds in March with the intent on getting good starts that can go out into the garden probably in June. They tend to bloom more of a summer flower for me, sometimes not even till later in the summer. I discovered growing asters with kind of a multicolored purple pink aster variety from Botanical Interest that I started growing 5 years ago, and they just were a high performer in the garden for me, so I really enjoyed them then. It's one of those things, you may have heard me talk about this before, but sometimes I have real good success with a thing, whether it's a veggie or a flower, in one year, and then I spend the rest of my gardening years chasing that success again, and you never necessarily get quite the same results. So I had a really good year about 5 years ago with asters. I've had other years where they've been okay, but never quite the same, never quite as good. So I'm constantly chasing that. The other thing that I discovered is after I learned that I liked growing some asters, then I realized on some of the other seed companies had varieties of different kinds of asters. So, for example, if you go to Johnny Seeds, they've got all kinds of different varieties of asters, which are fun to grow. And I've tried some of the different varieties of different colors and textures or kind of petal shapes, I guess you might call it. And had some success with those as well. But this year I'm kind of returning to the tried and true, so I'm planting, hopefully en masse, some asters from botanical interests. Calendula is another workhorse flower in the garden. Historically, I've grown them in my old garden, and they would reseed themselves and spread out and just be a very easy flower to grow. And I've enjoyed them. I grew some last year. I didn't grow that many. The ones that I grew last year were actually a different variety that had kind of more of a smaller, you might more delicate kind of flower to it. I have a picture or a little video of them just starting to bloom, but you can see that the overall head is just smaller than kind of what you might think of as the standard larger Pacific beauty calendula. This year I'm going to grow a slightly different variety, a calendula called the Zeolites. So yeah, I'm interested in doing it. I don't really have the space in the garden to grow lots and lots of just calendula everywhere anyway. So this is the time, the season in my gardening journey to try some different types of varieties of calendula. So that's what you'll see in this year's 2026 garden. Put down in the comments below if you grow calendula, if you have a favorite variety, or what your experiences may have been with them. Cosmos, I feel like I unlocked the secret to growing them better in my garden a couple of years ago. I used to struggle with getting very many cosmos in the garden, and then a couple of years ago I started to get masses of cosmos, lots of them. And the secret, if I can get the seedlings raised up enough, is growing bigger plants in pots before I put them out. So starting them as I will here in February in cell trays, and then potting them up. Last year I might pot them up into, say, red solo cups, and then getting them out in the garden. And I figured that by watching Gardener's World and Monty Don, and seeing kind of when he put his cosmos in the garden that he was putting them already raised up in 4-inch pots. And so when I started doing that, I started getting way success. Now there may still be, I still may struggle with getting the seedlings to the potting up stage a little bit, but I did pretty good last year in terms of growing lots of seedlings and then getting them out. The only thing is that I ended up with mostly all white cosmos last year, and I know I had some other varieties, so that kind of tells me that I lost some seedlings along the way. But you can see some videos here of last year's Cosmos show, and then also here are the cosmos that I am planting up for this year. Again, I'll do them with seeds and cell trays, and then I'll pot them up into larger pots, either 4-inch pots or red solo cups, and then I'll put them in the garden. I'll probably put them out. That cosmos, I feel like, want warmth, more warmth. They're more of a summer flower, so they'll go out June at the earliest, maybe late June. Kale. In my old garden, I used to say I was a kale farmer because I would grow so much kale, lots of different varieties. Just lots and lots of kale. In the new garden, of course, as I mentioned before, space is limited, so I have to be selective, and I'm only growing what I'm likely to use or eat. I'll grow like a variety that is for eating, and it's usually some kind of dino kale variety, the ones with like the long green leaves. You call them, I think they're called lacticino kale. I may be saying that wrong. And then I usually also will grow one that is for the look, like a purple leaf with kind of frilly edges that just looks really nice in the garden. And that's worked out well for me in the winter garden. I still have some kale overwintering that is carrying some of the look of the garden at this point right now in January. So yeah, here in terms of this year, I'm growing similar varieties, and yeah, look for what I'm doing with kale. I will be planting from seed here in March, and then getting it out into the garden probably in April. Cabbage is another veggie that I like to grow both for the eating and for the look in the garden. Cabbage is a veggie that my family will eat quite regularly. But then I like the look of a nice kind of cabbage in the garden. I think it says, veggie garden when you've got that cabbage growing there. And I've narrowed it down. I've grown different kinds of cabbages over the years, but I've narrowed it down to two varieties that I typically like to grow. I like to grow a Dutch cabbage that has kind of the little bit of pointy top on it, a classic kind of green cabbage. And I like to grow a large red cabbage. And because of the limited space in this garden, I can only do 2 or 3 of these. And so those large red ones are really for the look. They produce a huge canopy, so to speak, big leaves and everything, and they look nice in the garden. But when we're done, the actual cabbage itself, the cabbage ball, after I kind of take out the outer leaves that maybe have some bug holes in them or whatever, the red cabbage itself is actually smaller than the green cabbage, which actually has a smaller growth habit to begin with. So you can look for both of those in my garden this year. And I grew it last year, and you'll see it again this year. Chard is something I grow definitely for the look more than for the eating. Chard, if you don't know, is related to the beet family, and I definitely taste that kind of earthy beetness in the leaves. And it's not something that I typically, or that my family typically likes the flavor of a lot. Well, we can have some in the salad, or cooked up in a kind of stir-fried, or even cooked like spinach occasionally. So it's okay eating, but it's not something I'd grow a lot of for eating. I definitely, between kale and cabbage and chard, I would prefer kale and cabbage over chard. And in terms of the beet flavor, I prefer just beets. But I love the look of chard, and I have some actually that is still growing now in January, also helping give the garden a nice look to it in the winter. So I like the different kinds of colors you can get with the stems, and so growing chard for the look of it is something that I will continue to do, and hope you see it in my garden in coming videos. Chinese broccoli is a long stem broccoli that's kind of a cross between a flowering kale and a broccoli. It's something that I personally enjoy eating. My family will eat it. You eat the leaf and the stems. But I've had mixed results in my success on doing it, and I think it's mostly due to timing. I haven't really nailed down the right timing. Do I plant in the spring? Do I plant in the fall? Do I grow it over the summer? Last year I planted it in a little box. The seedlings were looking great, but ultimately the more mature plants that then started to flower, the stems were really thin. It's still edible, still be good, but a really good Chinese broccoli would have a stem that's like the thickness of a magic marker rather than the thickness of a pencil kind of thing. So anyway, I'll keep trying, and I'll plant some this year, and you can follow along and see how I'm doing. And if you have some tricks and tips for growing this plant, Chinese broccoli, here in the Pacific Northwest, put them down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experiences with it. Straw flowers have become another workhorse flower in my garden over the last few years. I started growing them a few years ago, and they grow all season, and then they last way into the fall. This year they've lasted into the winter. I've had straw flowers still in December and now in January. And they come in all kinds of different colors. Another thing that's nice about them is they save well. They're kind of this papery flower, and you can cut them, and they'll kind of hold their color and shape if you just let them dry out. You don't have to put them in a vase or anything. And so they're just a great flower that turns out to be fairly easy to grow in my garden, and keeps interest going all season and year round. Petunias are a flower that I love growing in the garden, so I grow a lot of them. The timing has been weird for me. I have been starting them earlier than I probably should, and then they'll actually start flowering under the lights. And so I've what's happened in the last couple of years is they would flower under the lights, and I would then trim them back quite severely. And I might even get a second flower before I even get them out in the garden. So I'm going to plant them a little bit later. In this section, I'm talking about March planting. So I'll wait maybe till the end of March to plant them from the seeds and then kind of let them go. They are a heat-loving flower. I think of them as being kind of commiserate or in the same season as my tomato in terms of growing the plant. They will get flowers before my tomatoes will get fruit for sure. So if I've grown them up under lights and then put them out, I'll get flowers starting in late June probably with petunias. And I just love how they spill over containers and they fill out. I've seen petunias in botanical gardens where you'd have large beds of all kinds of different colors, but you'd have one bed that has orange and another one that has a pink and another one that has a white or whatever, right? And just all kinds of different colors like that. I've had a hard time finding very specific colored petunias to kind of create that design myself. I have found it, but it's not in my kind of typical go-to seed catalogs. I'll find petunias that are just multicolored, and that's what I've been using, and what I'll use again this year is kind of a multi colored mix of petunias. But even so, that's still great. I love the texture, the overall look, as well as the colors of them. So look forward to lots of petunias in my garden this year. Phlox, or at least this variety of phlox, which I discovered from Botanical Interest a couple of years ago, is something that I am enjoying having in the garden that I'm going to plant again. And it just produces these little flowers. They're small. They're you can get them you can make them so they are clustered up, and they can have kind of longer stems, or at least the way I've been growing them, they end up with longer stems. But then the petals themselves are small, but they are kind of, I guess, lack for a better phrase for it, they're cute. They're just these kind of cute little flowers that are colorful and just a delight. Sometimes they're just things like that. It's hard to explain why. You just like them, and that's what is great about having your garden, is you can put these things that make you smile, that you like, and that's why I plant these phlox in my garden, and you'll see it again this year. Tomatoes. I'm going to start my tomatoes from seed in March. Man, there's so much to say about tomatoes. I gotta be structured here so that I don't go off the rails, and I'm sure I'll talk more about tomatoes in later videos anyway. So let's start with the seeds themselves. I have way too many tomato varieties here for the size garden. If I just had one plant of each of these, that would be already probably too much for my size garden, and I probably will want to grow 2 to 3 plants at least of each of these. So I will have a lot of tomato seedlings, and what I typically do is I grow way more tomato seedlings than I need, and then I give them away to friends and family, and then also have backups available, and then eventually just throw away the ones that never got planted out in the garden. And that gives me some options and choice about what can go in the ground. And what you'll see kind of in the series of video clips here I have in terms of my timeline of growing tomatoes, I'll seed in March here. I'll grow them under lights. I will pot them up from cell trays into usually red solo cups, and then from there continue growing them under lights until we get into usually mid to late May. And then I will put them into the garden beds there. Even that can sometimes be a little bit early, but I'll go ahead and do that. And then if you get the timing right, which can be difficult because our weather changes in terms of when the heat comes on and when the sun is out here in Portland, Oregon, it's not an exact science. I mean, really, there could be variability anywhere from April 15th until June 15th, and how that kind of works out. But in any case, once I get them into the ground, if the timing's right, they'll shoot up pretty quickly. I mean, if I put them in May, by mid to late June, I'll have a pretty good sized plant and maybe even some flowering. I don't really get tomato production in earnest though until August. So that's what I typically count on. A lot of people are like wringing their hands around in our area and kind of they're getting into July and they're like, where are my tomatoes? And I just kind of sit back and relax, and I know I'm going to have tomatoes in mid to late August, and then they're going to start then, and then they're just going to keep going, and they'll actually keep going. A lot of people start pulling their plants out in September, and my tomatoes will keep producing all the way through September into the beginning of October. It's usually not until mid-October that they stop producing, and that's because the light conditions. There's clouds and rain, and I say my tomatoes usually get washed out. I don't have a freeze. It's not like my tomatoes get frozen and die. It's that it just gets too wet, and then they get kind of mushy, and sometimes they'll actually split and burst from the sudden water and rain that's coming on in the fall here in the Pacific Northwest. So that's what kills off my tomatoes, is all the rain and wet and clouds with the lack of light that quits producing them, and they just don't even taste good anymore. So that's when I will terminate the plant and clean up the bed. But I've never held my tomatoes long enough that they actually got killed off by a freeze in my area.
It's April, mid-April. Time to get this stuff out of here.
April is the time where I'm gonna get the summer flowers going. Those that didn't need the longer lead time. So things like marigold and nasturtiums. It's also when I get the summer bulbs in. So dahlia bulbs and gladiola bulbs. Um, I haven't talked about lettuce yet. I might plant lettuce actually earlier in March. I didn't talk about it in the March segment. Or I might plant it in April. I'm still working out the timing there. I honestly, lettuce in general should be one of those easier things to grow, and it can be, but it's also one of the more challenging things just because of the timing. The timing issue that I have is that what I see happen in Portland is that in the March April timeframe, it goes from being very cold to being really warm all of a sudden. So I don't feel like we have enough time at just like say 60 to low 70s. It's like we go from 40s and 50s to suddenly 70s and 80s in a very little time frame, which doesn't leave a lot of opportunity for lettuces and spinach and things like that. At least that's been my experience. Obviously, people do grow those things in our area. Maybe some of you experienced growers might have some thoughts on this that you can put in the comments. Certainly, if you're a professional grower, you know how to do it, and certainly, farmers and things will do this with shade cloth and other kinds of things. But me, just like putting it straight out in the garden where the sun's beating down on it once it gets hotter. I feel like I don't have enough of those days where it's warm enough to get big enough, but not too warm to suddenly bolt on me. So love to hear other people's thoughts on their experiences with some of those items. But I will grow lettuce. I'm just not talking. I won't do specific discussion on it here because I'll grow lettuce at various times. I might even start some in February. So various times in February, March, April, just to try out different timings and see what might actually work out. So let me start with marigolds. I grow several types of marigolds. I grow big ones, white ones, and I like to grow French marigolds. And I have grown lots and lots of marigolds in the past as kind of border plants that would go around my tomatoes in my old garden. I grew so many marigolds of the French marigolds that I started saving the seeds. They were fairly easy to save in the fall so that I didn't have to buy too many seed packets of it because I was growing just a large number of marigolds in the old garden. Again, as you've heard me say many times about my new garden's small enough that I can't grow marigolds at that scale anymore. But I will still grow some French marigolds, and I will see this year if I can border them around some of my tomato plants, and then also just grow them as great summer flowers in pots, the different varieties that I have. Nasturtiums. I like to grow these as things that are going to spill over a little bit. They do, in my garden, tend to attract aphids more than other things. They attract kind of this like black aphid actually, more than more than anything else that I have. Last year I didn't have that problem, but last year they didn't really flower. I had a few little flowers. I just got like this really nice green foliage from it that lasted for a long time into the winter even. But I have had success with nasturtiums in the past. This is one where I think it works better if you plant it directly into the garden rather than seeding into cell trays. But I will seed into cell trays this year just because I prefer that kind of control. Um, and what I'm planting a burgundy color nasturtium this year. So wish me luck on getting these to do well in flower. Well, there are two kinds of summer bulbs that I'll plant in April, gladiolas and dahlias. In both cases, I have leftover bulbs from last year. I have a lot of dahlia bulbs. When I pulled out my pots just a week ago and started cleaning out my pots to refresh them, I just found loads and loads of dahlia tubers that had multiplied on me. So I'm hopeful that as I separate those out and I plant them around, I'll get lots and lots of dahlias from that. I do have some new dahlia tubers that I got from Costco as well that I'm going to include in the mix when I plant them. For gladiolas, I didn't get new ones, so I am just replanting the ones from last year. And technically, the way they were in the pots, they would have probably survived if I just left them in there and let them grow again. But because I wanted to clean out and rearrange things in my pots, I did take them out, and I do have them wrapped up in towels right now, waiting until I can replant them in April. So stay tuned for the summer bulb show. I think it'll be quite spectacular with the number of dahlias that I have coming, and the gladiolas, of course, are beautiful as well. Torch flower, also called a Mexican sunflower. It's also got a botanical name that I don't recall here. Like many things, it's got several names to it, but this has turned into another workhorse in my garden. It was just very easy to grow, and I plant from seed and I get lots of them. And so these flowers, I plant from seed in April, and then I'm going to get them out into the garden probably in June-ish. They're kind of same growth timing as my tomatoes. They are a heat-loving plant, but and they attract pollinators, and yeah, they're just great all the way around.
May is my last month of main season planting seeds. I will continue planting seeds into June, but at that point, I'm generally planting things with the anticipation of trying to grow into the fall, into the winter. I frankly have had limited success on that front, but my main season seed starting for the most part stops in May. I might still plant, depending on the weather, I might still plant seeds for quick small crops. Maybe, I mentioned in a previous segment about lettuce and kind of figuring out the timing, spinach, things like that. If even maybe bok choy stuff, if the weather isn't too hot, that I think maybe I can, if it's a cooler weather summer, for example, and I think, well, maybe I can grow some of those quickly over the summer, I might still plant some seeds as well for those in June or after May, with an expectation of a quick turnaround on those crops. But otherwise, yeah, May's going to be the grand finale, and so the kinds of things that I'm planting in May are either things that just need absolutely heat to they need the heat to do anything, and or stuff that maybe I would plant straight out into the ground. So I'm thinking about things like beans and corn. I even will do a little bit of okra. I like to do okra actually for the decoration. I like kind of what the okra looks like before it flowers in the garden, and then the flower of the okra. It's also when I will plant things like summer squash and sunflowers. I'll plant the winter squash, basically all the squashes, cucumbers, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to plant in May. So let's walk through it. So there's kind of three types of beans that I grow, or that I was trying to grow last year and that I will grow this year. There is the snap bean, that you eat the whole bean, and there's different varieties of that, of course, that you can grow. There is a scarlet, or a scarlet runner bean is a very specific type of a runner bean. So there's the runner beans, which you could also eat as snap beans, or you could eat the beans inside. And then there are shelling beans, the beans that you would save the bean as a dried bean and then cook up later and eat. And then and so those are those kind of beans. And then in terms of how they grow, you can grow kind of pole beans, which the vines will grow indeterminately, which is what I typically like to do most of my beans as. I plant those get them in the ground, say May or June. I will propagate them in little cell trays to get them sprouted, and then get them in the ground. So late May, June, I'll actually get them in the ground, the little starts. But with pole beans, it takes a while for them to get big enough to actually produce beans, and so I won't get beans until late August, but then they'll just keep producing indefinitely until the rains wipe them out, which could be late October. Alternatively, you can grow either your snap beans, your fresh eating beans, or your dried beans. You can grow them as bush beans, which instead of long stems that grow indefinitely, they have they grow maybe about yay tall or so, and they stop growing, and they produce a round of beans. And you might, you harvest them, you might get another round after that, or you might not, but it's basically designed for all the beans to come on at once. And bush beans are primarily used by farmers because of the ability to mechanically harvest them. But they're also going to produce beans earlier, so I'll do some bush beans just to get beans earlier in the garden. Last year, I was trying to grow both the snap beans and the dry beans, and I made the mistake of forgetting that I was trying to grow dry beans, and so I harvested all the beans that were designed for dry beans as snap beans, and we ate them fresh. And so I never got my dry beans last year, so I'm going to pay more attention this year. That's the problem with being busy, but then also doing a lot of gardening and growing a lot of different things, is I forget sometimes what I was doing, what I intended. I might start the plan at this time of the year, now sitting here in January, and then I'm planting things out in April, May, June, and then by the time I'm getting around to actually dealing with the harvests in August, September, I forgot what I did. I forgot what I planted. I forgot what I planned. So that was the case for me, funny enough, when it came to dry beans last year, but I'll give it another go this year. Corn. Last year I grew corn and winter squash in half whiskey barrels, and I'll probably do something similar this year. My treatment of corn is pretty unconventional all the way around. For one thing, in a small garden like this, it's kind of oddball to grow corn because if you've grown corn before, you would know that you get one ear essentially per stalk, and then it's done. Like you don't get more, and so it takes up a lot of space. You got to grow a lot of stalks of corn in order to get a decent amount of corn. We grew I probably had 9 stalks in the garden last year, and had enough for a side dish for our dinner for a family of 4, and we enjoyed it. It was fun. It was a kind of a ceremonial thing to harvest the corn and have it for dinner and say, yeah, we grew it, and that was fun, right? But I like growing it for the look of it. I like how it looks in the fall garden, the stalks. And then after we've harvested the corn, it's fun to eat too, and just the fun of growing it, right? Which is part of gardening. It's not really necessarily all about the most practical production possibilities. It's what's just fun to grow, and that's why I grow it. So just the fact that I grow it in a small garden to begin with, I think is a little bit unconventional. That I'm growing it in containers is probably a little unconventional. The fact that I plant it in red solo cups and let it germinate and grow a little, the beginnings of a plant before I actually even plant it out in the garden is yet again unconventional. So all the way around, I do it in a fairly unconventional way. But when you're only growing 9 stalks. I mean, each stalk is precious, right? So I'm babying it, and I'm making sure that I had perfect germination, and that I have a nice strong plant that is actually going in the garden. And of course, like everything else I seed, I had more than 9 that I seeded to begin with, so I got to choose the best 9 that from in order to, and the best plants essentially that would actually fit my garden, and either give away or compost the rest of them. And when we were done and harvested the cobs, the ears off the stalks, I left the stalks in the garden for a little while just because I liked the look of it in the garden, like I mentioned before. And then I chopped down the stalks and I used them for our fall Halloween decorations on our deck. So it's great. It was a great all the way around experience, and I'll definitely do it again this year. Okra is something I grow just for the decorative value in the garden. I don't grow enough to actually eat the okra. The okra that I grew last year was a red okra, and the little clip I have here doesn't even have it flowering, but even just before it flowers, I think it looks nice in the garden. And for all of last year, I only had 2 plants of okra in the garden, so just kind of 2 of those spears coming up. Okra usually needs a lot of heat, so it's not that common to grow in our area. It's something that you would see grown more in the south. But we've had enough heat, for it's worked out that I can grow okra, and I can sometimes get it to flower in the garden, and the flowers are beautiful too. So in any case, I'll do it again because I have some leftover okra seed, I believe, that I can plant again and kind of do the same thing I did last year with it. Summer squash. I love to grow summer squash. It's one of the things that we will eat, that I can have served at our dinner. And I like to eat it, and I like to grow different colors, different textures, try different things. The problem, of course, with summer squash is that it grows big. I mean, it usually has a fairly big habit for a small garden, and so growing lots of different varieties is a difficult thing to do in my small garden, but I give it a go, and you'll see here kind of some of the varieties that I'm looking at for this coming year. Sunflowers. Well, this one is interesting for me because my wife doesn't like sunflowers. She just, the big heads on them, she finds scary, I guess. And so what we've compromised to over the years is that I grow kind of the more unusual sunflowers, things that are more decorative with the smaller heads, but I don't grow in the main garden the big giant sunflowers with that you would normally expect. I start sunflower seeds in either 4-inch pots or red solo cups. So the varieties that I liked growing last year that I'm going to grow again this year was kind of a smaller red burgundy sunflower, one that was called the Moulin Rouge. And then I like growing the little teddy bear looking sunflowers. I think those are great. I think other, I'll look over time, I'll look at other flowers that are kind of sunflowers that are smaller. They might be mistaken for a different kind of flower, a different kind of daisy, or something of that nature in terms of how small they are and the different colors that can come out of them. And there's quite a wide variety of sunflowers these days that you can get. Miniatures and colors and things like that. So that's the kind of sunflowers that I grow. But like a lot of people, sunflowers are emblematic of the summer garden in some way. So it would be a shame or disappointing if I literally didn't grow any at all. So you'll see them in the garden again this year. Winter squashes and pumpkins. I talk about those things interchangeably, and I grow an unreasonable amount of varieties of these for a small garden. I really like growing these. I don't know if it's just the idea that you plant them earlier in the garden. I mean, the seeds are one of the last things I seed, so I'm going to start them usually in 4-inch pots in May, and then I'm going to get them into the ground or where they're going to sit for the season. Last year that was in whiskey barrels and primarily, I'm going to do that probably in June, and then they're just going to sit there the whole season and grow their vines and grow their pumpkins, and then have something to harvest in September, October. Ideally, you want one of my goals is to get a nice pumpkin by Halloween, and I grow these winter squash for both good eating. My family likes to eat likes to eat pumpkins and winter squash. So we grow the ones that we like to eat. So that includes things like kabochas, delicatas, butternut squashes. And then I grow things that are just for show, just for the look. I like how they look in the garden when they're kind of grown and they're kind of just sitting in the garden as you get towards fall. And I like how they look as a nice display on the table. And so different kinds of pumpkins, big ones, small ones, gray ones, orange ones. I like the Cinderella style pumpkins. I grow a lot of pumpkins and squash for the size garden we have. I say I grow a lot. I put a lot of plants in, but I don't have enough space to really grow a lot. So a lot of plants for my garden might be, 8 plants, and out of that I might successfully get 6 to 8 actual pumpkins or winter squash when I'm done with it in this size garden. I'm going to see if I can produce more, if I can get like more of the edibles this year, like kabochas or delicatas, because we can never have too many of those. They can stay for a little while and they are good eating. So I've got a couple of pictures here you can see of what I grew last year, and also I've shown kind of the seeds that I have set up for this year. Zinnias are the last flower that I grow from seed for the garden season. Unlike my veggies, I pretty much plant my flowers during my seeding season, my primary seeding season, which will end in sometime in May, and then I don't seed more flowers for continual crop production or anything like that later. I don't know if like flower farmers do that. But for me, I'm growing the flowers. I want them to kind of become blooms as quickly as possible in the garden. I know that's not really going to happen, so I know they will kind of space out, and I take that into account. But I'm growing the flowers with the idea that, well, as soon as they can bloom, I want them to bloom, and then I want them to carry through the whole season all the way into October if possible. And then that's that. I'm not going to have most flowers after that. Zinnias kind of are the final hurrah in terms of seed planting for flowers for me. I put those seeds. I will start them in cell trays. That does work well for me to start up zinnias in cell trays and then put them out in the garden. Depending on what's going on with the weather, I mean, if I were to put zinnias, for example, in cell trays early May, and then if we had a particularly cool May, I might pot them up into, say, red solo cups or a 4-inch pot, and then put them out into the garden later when things warm up. But often I'm going from cell trays straight into wherever they're going to go in the garden. And in the past, I've grown lots and lots of zinnias. Last year, I planted a good 10-20 cell tray full of zinnias, so that would be a large number of plants. But what you see here in the vid and the pic that I'm showing is pretty much all I got for the year for my zinnias, which was fine. I had so much going on in the garden. It's a small garden, so getting a nice pot with some zinnias and then kind of a nice lone zinnia in one of the garden beds worked out just fine for me last year. But I will try to grow more. I mean, these are things that I can kind of plop in. They kind of grow a nice straight stem and then the flower on top. So I can kind of plop them in and around things, and I could potentially grow a lot of zinnias in different places, squeezing them in places. So they are something I could fit much more of in my small garden, and I will give it a go this year with planting some zinnias. I get my zinnia seed, like you've heard me in this video talk about many times, getting seed from Botanical Interest. I've been getting my zinnia seeds from Botanical Interest. They have a bunch of different varieties there, so check them out there. I get different varieties in different years and try different things. I mean, it's color and petal shape and things like that is kind of what the variants that you're getting with the different zinnia seeds that you might start. Okay, well, that's zinnias. Well, if you made it all the way to the end, thanks for joining me, and I hope to share time with you in our next video.